All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm just going to pause for a few minutes here and let people get logged in. So we'll just stall for a few seconds. For those of you, all right, I see our numbers starting to go up. For those of you who are regulars attending these classes, welcome back as always. Can't believe it's already time for spring vegetable garden. So we've got spring upon us. Peg is joining us today from the Fair Oaks store. I know most of you all are familiar with her. For those of you who are not, she's been teaching classes with us for a very long time on a wide variety of topics. She brings a lot of experience, and it's always a pleasure to hear from her. For those of you who are new and joining us for the first time, just know if you have any questions during the class today, you can use the Zoom menu, hit the Q&A button on your menu and type your questions in. I'll be monitoring that during the class and giving questions to Peg to answer when she's ready to start taking some questions. If you have any issues during the call today, please feel free to send me a chat. I'll help you out. We are recording, so we will be sending out a coupon and a link to the recording following the class. So if you have to check out at any point, just know you can catch up on the rest of the class later. And I think, Peg, that's about it for me. I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. And yes, it is very exciting because we're all ready for the color, like the color that's behind me, and ready to plant that vegetable garden. I have begun to do a lot of that at my own home. And today we actually got in a nice size shipment of the vegetables because they like the cool weather. Okay, we've had some very warm weather and a bit of a warning, and we'll go into that a little deeper as we go along. But I think it's supposed to be down to 27 maybe over the weekend. So it's going to cool down. However, these veggies love the cool weather. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we start talking about the veggies, as I walk through my garden, because it's an old garden, okay, and I started many years ago with hellebores, which come into bloom. They began to come in January, and they are in full bloom right now. But we have some at the garden center that are just magnificent. And I did a seminar last week on gardening and plants, and I showed the hellebores, and I said to them, they're really quite promiscuous. So they interbreed and they have all these babies, and I've never met one that I didn't like. And so I have a mass of them now because I've transplanted the babies. So I said, if you look at the cost and think, oh my goodness, that's a bit much, it really isn't, because it takes a lot of hybridizing to get some of these to this point. And while you don't know what the babies are going to be like, they're all fantastic for me. So boy, do we ever have a selection of those. So anybody that's interested in hellebores, it's an exciting plant. And it's evergreen. Except this is the time of the year, and I've already done mine, to go in and carefully clip off all the old foliage. Now, all that being said, let's actually go into the garden and see what I'm doing right now, okay? I like to talk about things that are in the ground, and I like to talk about things in containers. Right now, if you're doing things in containers, realize that that soil is going to be warmer now than the soil in the ground. And so if you put these vegetables and you're growing some in containers, they're going to take off a little faster and be really happy because of the soil that's in this thing. So let's bring up the first picture, honey, and we'll talk about what's going on. I do both in the ground and in containers. And I have a lot of large containers. And here again, most of them are composite. or of plastic of some sort or another. And I had them for years. And I do reuse them. And I do reuse the soil, unless it's tomatoes, which really need to be rotated and not grown in exactly the same spot or the same container year after year. Usually they're fine for 2 years, but in going into that third year, sometimes they're more susceptible to getting a blight. And so I do rotate if I'm planting them in containers. And because they're in containers and because that soil is warmer, if you cover it, which we will discuss, that will get it through even light frosts sometimes. So now these containers, I decided we're going to plant some scallions and we're going to plant some onions. And this is prime time to do that. And everybody in the family loves both of those, the young spring onions. I don't grow them to make big onions. We use them as spring onions. Now, James Owen, one of my grandsons, is helping because he is going with that small shovel down to the very bottom of that container and completely loosening up that soil. And that's what you need to do if you're reusing old soil, okay? Because over time it compacts, okay, and it needs to be loosened up. So he is loosening up all the soil that's in that container. Now we removed some of that soil and we're adding back in about a third fresh soil. And you can see little Clara, which of course all of you who've been following me know that little Clara is frequently in the garden with me. And she is putting down the fertilizer. And so if you come back to me for a second, we're going to talk about the fertilizer. I had intended to bring a scoop up and I forgot to do that, but we have those wonderful little scoops downstairs that if you grow a lot of things in containers, they are wonderful. But what kind of fertilizer am I using? I use a lot of Plantone. I buy big bags of Plantone because I use a lot of that. This is all organic. These products are Espoma products, which I like the full line of those products. And I really pretty consistently reach for these, okay? There is one also called Garden Tone, which you can use in the vegetable gardens. And I don't worry too much about using one over the other because the makeup is very similar. It's all organic. And there is one down there, which I did not bring up either, that is Tomato Tone. And that one is really specifically for tomatoes, and it's good to have it, okay? Now, you can do other things too, because I do things organically. You can also use a product called Osmocote, which is a slow release product, okay? I don't use this very much, but a lot of people really do enjoy it. And then there's also, these are not organic, there's also the Blossom Booster and a Garden Tone type 2 that's liquid fertilizer, and you know exactly what you're using. So that is primarily what I use. There are a lot of different fertilizers down there, and there are a lot of very good ones, but I didn't bring all of them up. These are the ones, primarily the Plantone and the Garden Tone and the Tomato Tone, that I pick up to use in the vegetable garden. Now, but before we go any further with this, everything is timely. And as far as fertilization is concerned, Espoma also makes a bulb tone. Right now, all of the narcissus and the little bulbs are all up in the garden, and a lot of them are in bloom. Fortunately, in my garden, I have a number of varieties, and so I will have some continuing on for the next few weeks. But the green is coming up, and that is when you need to fertilize. So you, as soon as you can, go out and work some of the bulb tone around those plants, because what you're seeing right now was formed last year. And you are going to prepare those bulbs for a nice bloom next year. And now is the time to do it. Now is the time to fertilize while those plants are nice and green and they can use that fertilizer. So just put it around the bulbs that you have, and you can scratch it lightly into the ground if you please, okay? And so that's the timely thing to do in the garden right now. Okay, let's go to the next one. Here again, I did not bring it up, but one of my favorite tools here that she's using, because you've got some leverage. You could see that she put the fertilizer into the container, and this is a large container. And so she used over a cupful in this. And now she's thoroughly mixing it in. Now, remember, Clara is 4 years plus 3 months, okay? And she's been gardening with me for a long time. And in the next picture, she is actually planting the shallots and the onions. And I showed her, I dug the little trench all around the outside at the proper depth. I showed her what was the top, what was the bottom, and she put every one of them in correctly. And of course, it's near the surface. You want to put them in and cover the bulb just a little bit. Now, she was not pleased that I didn't have gloves to fit her. And believe me, when she comes back this weekend, she will have gloves to fit her. So she's using another one of my garden favorites, which are the foxgloves, because I can feel everything that I'm doing with those, and I like them very much. But they were a little large for her, but you know, she dealt with it because she didn't really want to get into it with her hands, okay? Now, in the next picture, this was something that I just saw yesterday. She is actually planting some seeds into eggs that her mother helped her fix, okay? And she had done some last week that are in the window and already popping up. So this is a wonderful, wonderful learning curve for young children. And why am I continually showing you Clara in the garden with me? This is my great-granddaughter. I worked with my children in the garden. I worked with my grandchildren in the garden. And now I'm blessed with these little great-grandchildren in the garden. So coming back to me for a moment, there are one of the best selections of seed downstairs that I can imagine. The companies are fantastic, and there's some unusual ones. Southern Exposure Seed Exchanges is very unusual, and they do a lot of the old seeds, which are wonderful. And now one of them, Roper Seeds, this is new for us, I think this year, is a container collection. They're smaller plants that do really well in containers, although all the others have done well for me, but you can see I have big containers also. One of the beauties of doing seeds, as well as some that are already started, you can do the ones that are already started and then do some seeds, and you're going to get a continuity of production. But also, you will find there some that we may not have out as plants. For instance, there's a very interesting Suyulong cucumber. Very interesting, fun to try some of these new and unusual things. I love to have sunflowers, and now's the time to start them inside if you want to do that. But what I do when I buy a package of the taller sunflowers is I will start just a few inside, which I have already done, and we'll be doing more. And then save half that pack to start outside. So they're going to bloom at slightly different times and overlap frequently. So there's a lot of different choices with sunflowers. So you can buy some of the plants to get a head start. You can start some yourself, or you can put them directly in the ground. It's fun also because there's different, this has a color that's different, and they're good right now. You can seed them directly in the ground, or you buy the plants. But this particular one, I've certainly never done before. It's called, and usually the Georgia collards are the ones that I do. This one is called Alabama Blue, and it would be fun to give that a try. So by all means, try some, with some of which I've already started, and they're coming up, and they're in a window, or it's actually a door, sliding glass doors, and they get really good sunshine. But I also this year have some under lights, and it's LED lights too, so it's very cost effective, you know. Those are great. Now, another thing that we have downstairs, and there's so many other things there, are something that I did with one of my grandchildren, and I don't have a whole lot of space, so I have to be with sunshine, that is. So I have to be a little judicious, but we did some of the small potatoes in large containers, and he was so excited to watch them grow, but then to dig them and see how they grew. And he ate every one of them, I think, you know. But look how fun it is to grow some of the unusual ones. This is a yellow one. This is what color would you call that? Purple. Okay, purple. So it's just a fun time of the year, and you can already start some of these. You could actually start some of those inside now. You don't need to put them out quite yet, but and harden them off, and then 3 weeks from now put them outside. They'd be all right. That's not the case with tomatoes. Okay, it's too soon for that sort of thing. But what we do have are a lot of beautiful new starts out there. And the big advantage is, because you can go ahead and put these in the ground or in a container, is that you've got these as a starter. And then if you've got the space, you can also plant some seeds later. And then you've got production on 2 levels, okay, coming in all of the time. But let's talk about the next step. This is doing things in containers, and we'll talk more about that. But let's talk about garden preparation, okay? My soils, because I have been going through all this for many years, my soils are good, but not everybody's are good, okay? So I just took a picture of this coast of Maine, and I actually brought some of the bags up, so we'll come back to me. This is, I have discovered, fantastic. I love to use this, not in the containers, but in the ground. And it's a lobster compost. It's all organic. And I really do enjoy doing this. And I'll talk about how we use it in some of the pictures. Okay, so lobster compost. Now, David Yost really likes, and so do I, as organic also, the bumper crop, which is really a good soil. This is to work into your rows or work into your individual plantings as you're putting these things into the soil. Okay, we're not talking about containers here. All right, let's try the next picture, Danny. See what we've got coming up next. Okay, this is as the little plants have been put into the garden, okay? And you can see I've pulled back the winter mulch, and I've made my rows. I've added my the coast of Maine lobster compost into that and then planted it in. And then I'll pull that mulch back. And I think perhaps I've got that in the next picture there. Oh, no, well, we'll talk about this. Then I'll pull that mulch back. So I don't mind pulling a few weeds. In fact, I was doing it yesterday, in the, not in the vegetable garden yesterday, but just in the garden in general, and worked at it for 30 or 40 minutes, and that was enough. I don't want to go out there and weed all day long. So I try to do things to keep from having to do that, okay? Now, these are actually pictures from last year, and that's where the onions have begun to grow. And it's in a container, and I did put a little bit of gravel on top of this to keep the squirrels from digging in, because squirrels love freshly turned soil, whether it's in the container or in the ground. There's just something about it that's a magnet to them. And so I either use mulch, which is easy to do, okay, or this is the tiny gravel. It's the 3/8 inch gravel, okay. And let's see what's coming up next. Yeah, we'll do the next one then. Lettuce. You can start now in the ground or in containers with lettuce that you buy already started. And that's going to give you a jump on having lettuce. And then you can do seeds every couple of weeks so that you have a continuity, and go right into the summer. Some of these, particularly, this is a wonderful thing. All of these things like full sun, but where they're planted at my house is not full sun all day long. It is a cumulative amount of sun with 6 to 8 hours through the midday, and it gets a lot of afternoon sun, so it does well. But for these cool season things, they'll take a little more shade. And so particularly if you're doing the lettuce or any actually of these cool season things, if they are in part shade, provided they get some sunshine, in the summertime, they'll keep going, and lettuce will also. And the fun thing is, in the next one, you'll see last summer, Clara harvesting the lettuce, and she loves to go out and actually eat it standing on the spot, you know, and it's all organic, so I don't have to worry about it, okay? And then the following picture, because I want to go through these fairly quickly, so we have plenty of time to answer questions too. Raised bed gardening is very popular right now, and it works beautifully because, number one, you have extremely good drainage, okay? So we have some wonderful raised garden mixes, and then adding in something like bumper crop or adding in the lobster compost, you're going to have a wonderful soil. And then adding in also some of the garden tone or the plant tone, you're geared to go, okay? And these are rows that are pulled and ready to be planted, whether it's right now with these cool season things, or when the weather levels out just a little bit. Don't get too anxious with tomatoes, okay? In the following picture, I don't grow a lot of beets. I don't have a tremendously big space, so I try small amounts of things, particularly to show the kids what will grow and what it's like when you grow them. And I was very pleased last year to have grown these beautiful beets, and they were so tasty. You can also use the beet greens in this, okay? Now, to keep down the work, in the next picture, you'll see what I do between rows, okay? I put down several layers of newspaper. Just one layer won't do, okay? So this is 4 or 5 layers of newspaper. Be sure you overlap. This is between rows and among things, okay? And then I put down the Virginia Fines mulch on top of that. And then I don't have to go back in there and weed. Now, this can be done in your vegetable garden. It can be done in your regular garden. The place that you cannot do this is if you've got bulbs in an area that are up right now, you can see where they are. And so you can mulch around them now. But if you wait until later, it's very easy to forget where those bulbs are, and then they won't keep coming back up, okay? So I highly recommend this to keep down weeds, but not over your bulbs, okay? Can't do that, okay? Let's see what's in the next one. All right, what else is wonderful to plant now? We actually did not get these peas in this week, but I'm sure we'll have them next week and the following week. This is another thing that Clara really enjoyed doing, and my grandchildren and children before me, is to go out and literally eat these wonderful sugar snap peas right off the plants. And they grew a lot faster because they were in containers, but they do well in the ground also. Now, in the next picture, you're going to see when I finished actually mulching all of this. Growing up in the deep South, pine needles were a wonderful thing for me. I loved it and I'm very nostalgic about it. Plus, I don't handle heavy bags very easily anymore. And so I put down a minimum of the Virginia Fines bark. And then I put the pine needles all around those. I do not have to weed in that garden. It's very rare that a weed comes through that, okay? In the next one, I have spinach. And that is the prettiest spinach I think I've ever grown. And looking back at me right now, these are tiny baby spinach. Most of the time I go for Bloomsdale spinach because that's the golden oldie. But I noticed in the ones that came in today that there's a couple of other varieties, and I'm anxious to trial those. Okay, let's go back. Wait a minute, Danny. Let me see where I am with this. No, we don't have to go back. Okay. We will continue though, because I want to be sure I get all these pictures in. Broccoli. Well, that was my spinach, and oh my, was it good. We eat a lot of fresh greens and they're very good for you, and these are organic. This is the beauty of being able to do some of the things at your home, even if it's a small number, is that you know that you don't have these insecticides all over them, you know. Broccoli is another one that I enjoy growing, and this again is in the containers, but they do well in the ground also. And it's important to get them in. Now, if you do some things from seeds, I recommend you do this, or even if you don't. These are plants that grow well now and into the beginning of the heat of summer, but they grow extremely well in the fall. But people don't realize if you're doing from seed particularly, you really need to start those seeds in late August so that they're mature enough to do well for you in the fall. And they grow deeply into the fall depending upon the weather. And if you cover them, which we'll talk about covering things, you can extend the season on both ends. So it's well worth doing some covering now and then. Unfortunately, the brassicas are what we call these. The greens, the collards, the turnips, the kale, the broccoli are all susceptible to cabbage worms. There's a tiny little yellow butterfly that loves these greens, and they're not fun because the little caterpillars get down into the heads of that broccoli and it's not funny. So there's a couple of things you can do not to have those. And one is to use this cover that I'm going to show you, or you can use an all organic product called Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. And it's organic, it's safe, and you can spray with that to keep from having those caterpillars. Those are the ones you don't want. We don't want to kill the other caterpillars, but those are, I haven't found anything particularly beneficial about them, okay? So I don't feel guilty when I decide that I don't need those anymore, okay? And in the following picture, I'll show you what I did a little later. We're in March right now. It's way too soon to think about tomatoes. It's too soon to plant green beans. Too soon for squash, for cucumbers. Those are things that come when the weather warms up and you're not going to have frost. So you have to watch for that even going into April. But because I've got all of these big containers and they're not inexpensive, but they last for years. The ones that I'm using right now, I've been using for several years. And so there's longevity to those. So I decided to try last year. I did lettuce all around the outside, and in the center, I put a tomato, and this was early April last year, which was too early to be putting tomatoes in. But I covered it with the frost cloth, and it did beautifully, and then I had tomatoes early. And in the next picture, you want to be sure that you have plenty of parsley planted, because parsley is a wonderful thing to cook with. It's very nutritious, and the swallowtail butterflies love to lay their caterpillars on parsley. They love the parsley. And you maybe if you want to try to protect them from the birds, I suppose you could cover it until they reach the instar stage and they begin to change. Then you have to take it off, okay? But plant some extra parsley, because they can strip it, but they're wonderful, and everybody wants swallowtails. We're all into, and should be even more so, planting the beneficials. They're very important. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's come back to me first, Danny. Okay, let's talk about that. Thank you for lifting that. Well, this is called frost blanket, and it's a roll. There's different types down there, but it's a frost cloth. It's a very thin fabric, and it holds up for a long, long time, so you can reuse it year after year even. And it does protect it a bit from the cold. It's not going to protect it 10 degrees from the cold, but it's several degrees from the cold. And I love to use it. If in those rows, I could put down a long row of this, but when you do that, you have to, because you can leave it on. The wind doesn't hit it, which is good, but the sun and the rain go through it, and that is good. But what I do is pin it down with side pins. They look like a really great big hairpin, and they're reusable also. Because when you put it on, you can leave it on for quite a while, actually. I'm protecting mine somewhat to warm up the soil and giving them a little bit of protection, because they've just come out of a greenhouse and they need that protection right now if you're going to put them right in the ground, and they don't have time to be hardened off, because there's 27 degrees possibly predicted Saturday night maybe. But you want to put it loosely over when you're doing this, and pin it down so that they have a chance to grow underneath until you're ready to take it off. Now, as a word of warning, everybody is in the same boat right now with the weather has been nice and warm and things are coming out way ahead of schedule. I have my saucer magnolias in full bloom, and my other deciduous magnolias are heavily budded, and all of the new growth on my mop head hydrangeas is showing. And that is, I can't do anything about those big fruit trees, okay? But I'm going to have to go out and cover those hydrangeas. Otherwise, 27 degrees, unless it's windy, sometimes if it's windy, it won't settle down and it won't kill that new growth, but it might, and I don't want to take that chance. So I'm going to go all the way over these things. I'm going to pin it down with those side pins very carefully, otherwise the wind blows it off, okay, to be sure that they're covered and that doesn't get killed. I can leave that on for as many days as I feel the necessity to protect from the weather, so that I don't have to go out there and continually put it on and take it off, okay? So this is an invaluable thing to have for a lot of different uses, okay? Can we put that back down for me? But here in the next picture, I think we'll show you a little bit better what the fabric looks like. And yeah, and let's see the side pins, and you can tamp those all the way down, and you put it down often enough so that the wind will not blow it off, okay? And in the following picture, this one is the tomato plant, we could say, okay, which is not going in right now, but all these other things, I did it with the, even with the onions, because it makes it a little bit warmer and it keeps the squirrels out of it. Now, what I also did, this one was done last year, but what I did this year was literally loosely put it on and brought it around the outside of the container and tied it off tightly with a nice secure string. Okay. Now, once you've gotten all of your cool season things in, and you begin to think about your tomatoes and your cucumbers, in the next picture, I have invested several years ago in a number of these tomato cages that Bob Warhurst, God rest his soul, designed. And they're made into two pieces so that you can, if you don't get it into place at the proper time, you can still put it in place. They serve two purposes for me. You can, because they hook together, you can see I've hooked them together where you could put the peas to grow up them. You could put tomatoes to grow up them, but basically you usually hook them together for the tomatoes and for the cucumbers, okay? And they're very, very substantial. They go down deeply into the ground, and so they don't fall over with the weight of the tomato. But then when the tomatoes are all finished in the early fall, hopefully, I take those cages and I use them to protect some of the most expensive shrubs that I have to keep the deer from rubbing them, because deer can damage as much with their rubbing in the fall as they do with their eating all year, okay? I'm not a favorite of Bambi, you can tell, I'm sure. Okay, among all of these things, it really is fun to have, especially if you have small spaces and you don't have room for a lot of trees, like cherry trees, or apple trees, or peach trees. This is something you can do. And I was thrilled last year with the production on my figs. I do recommend, although it's a little bit of a pain, I do recommend that you cover them when you see these little figs beginning. I do recommend that you cover them with the bird netting or the deer netting, preferably, because it's a little thicker than the bird netting, because the birds and whatever, you have to do a race out there, and sometimes the birds win, and they wait until just time to pick them to do that. Okay, I've had really good luck with overwintering these. I usually use pine straw, which I'll later use to mulch with, around the bases of these, and I'll use those tomato cages to fill with a mixture of my leaves, and to aerate those leaves, I'll use it mixed with straw, not hay. Hay has wheat seeds in it, and you don't want that. It's straw and or pine needles. So that's great. Now I'm having pretty good luck with the next one, which are blueberries. And the kids love these. Now, a bit of warning here. These blueberries really like an acidic soil. And so be a little careful that they're positioned in such a way that you can maintain that acidic soil, while most of your vegetables like to be in 6 to 7, okay? And if you don't know what your soil is, well, there's 2 ways. You can see how well things are growing, which is how I do it a lot. And if they're thriving, you don't have to worry about it, okay? But it's always good to test the soil, and you can, bring your soil samples in, and we can test only for the pH, okay? Now, again, we're going to talk about different ones' favorites. And in the next picture, you have a favorite of David Yost, and that's the earth box. This is a self-watering kind of thing. I've never used these. I have so many different ones that I just don't have the time to do that. Okay, but he has just his deck in a small townhouse garden, and he loves to grow his tomatoes and basil in the earth boxes. Now, you can do that with the tomatoes 2 years running using some of the same soil, but after that, I suggest that if you're using the same earth box, you use that soil out in the garden or in some other container and put fresh soil in. And as just the next one is just a fun shot. We'll talk about herbs later. And this was a beautiful, beautiful way to do herbs on somebody's deck. But in the next picture is how I do them, and we will certainly be talking about that. Now, we're talking about people using their spaces completely, okay? And in this next picture, boy, I'm going to have to go through these fast then, because I won't have any time to talk about answer questions. Okay, let's go to the next one, Danny. Front gardening in your front yard. I don't want to belabor this, but if you're going to do that, do a mix, and don't leave tomato cages up over winter, because nobody would appreciate that, and the HOA probably wouldn't allow it. This I did in my driveway. It was very attractive, and it was picked up at the end of the season. I only did it once. Now, in the next picture, I'm just going to show you fun things quickly, because I do want to take a few questions. This is the garden in its peak. You can see that there's kale in the background that I'm still eating. You can see a mixture with marigolds. I love the marigolds. They're edible if you like the flavor of them. They repel insects, the bad guys. And I love particularly the nasturtiums. Now, those we like to eat. And I have them mixed with herbs. In the following picture, I have a lot of other things there. This was a year that I tried a section for cut flowers, but this is one way to accommodate the birds, bees, and butterflies. In the next picture, again, for fun, this was when the rose was in bloom. You can see the use of the marigolds and how fun it can be and how attractive it can be. Now, if you chose to do something in your front yard, which a lot of people, as Andre Villette, my friend, used to say, you pay taxes on it, why don't you use it more? Fine, make it attractive, and you can. Now, I took pictures when you display gardens, fantastic, and this was beautiful. This is long rows of lovely stuff in the summertime. And then I also had one that we took a couple of years ago at the White House. So look at the White House stuff. Some raised beds, some in the ground. You can do fun things even with hanging baskets. Again, a display garden. And in the following picture, more things that you can intermix these vegetables with other existing attractive plants and be, you know, really, really happy with that situation. Okay, in the following picture, this was taken last year. Involve the youth, get them off the computer, let them discover how things grow, and appreciate nature, appreciate the beneficials, and help take care of it. Don't take those young people out there and have them weed for half a day. They won't love the garden if you do that, but they will love it if they can watch these things grow, and they will usually eat just about anything if they have helped to grow it, okay? And in the following picture, we're having people do a lot of the berries now, and there are some that are thornless. And this is in my oldest granddaughter's garden with her little niece, Clara, picking the raspberries. And she had quite a lot, really, of the raspberries, okay? Let's come back to me, because that's the last of the pictures. And I did bring Bobex up here, but we don't use Bobex. And there's also I have to be fair here, even though I use the Bobex consistently, a lot of our customers use the liquid fence. These are organic, but you don't put them on your vegetables, because if the deer don't like them, neither will you, okay? I do have heavy duty deer fencing all around that garden that I just showed you, because I have so many deer, and that does not make me happy at all, okay? All right, I think we've got a few minutes now that we can take some questions. I hope I covered this well enough, but really now is the time to get out and put these things in your garden. And doing this in some of that frost cloth, you won't be sorry, okay?
Thanks, Peg. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and let everybody know we're probably not going to get to all the questions today, but submit any that you have. We will do our best. And I've been trying to answer ones that are straightforward about like brands and stuff, while, you know, like straightforward questions that I can answer, just so that we can get to more of them. But Peg, first question, we've had a few people ask this. It is the lifelong battle against the squirrels. Is there anything you recommend to keep them from getting into specifically tomatoes, but really into anything?
Well, you can, if you're really careful, particularly if you're have a nice sturdy cage, you can buy some of the deer netting and put that over them. You know, oftentimes you will see, even in commercial plantings, where they have small coops of things to hold it up over the pansies or whatever they've got planted. And then the deer don't get it, or the squirrels don't get it either. Okay, so you can do that. And I definitely am going to do that with my figs this year to cover them, because I'm not going to share those figs. I'm just not going to do it, you know. They don't seem to bother. Now the birds will go for the blueberries, so I'll probably do those too. But if you've got a problem with squirrels, or I have wonderful box turtles, And they overwinter in my mulch piles, really. So I'm really careful that I don't dig into that mulch pile till spring, because I know they're wintering there. They'll be coming out soon. But if they get into the garden, they'll get what they can reach. Okay, so always harvest from the bottom, because those are what the box turtles go for. So about the only thing you can do to keep them from digging in the soil, I either use that fine gravel. River jacks are usually 3/8 inch, but that doesn't help with the harvesting of the stuff. You would have to use the lightweight deer fencing.
Okay. Do we sell deer fencing at the store?
Yes, we do.
We do.
They're
Okay.
all different types. Okay.
Okay. And you mentioned a deer and rabbit repellent. I didn't hear that. Did you? Was it Bob X?
Yes, but you can't put it on your vegetables.
No, not on vegetables. Okay. So go with netting if you've got veggies.
Netting. No, you cannot put it on your vegetables.
Okay. Okay, so for the person asking, the store we're mentioning is any of our 3 locations. So we sell these at all of our locations. Sorry, I just saw that question come in.
Sometimes there is some slight variation.
Yes.
But it's not large. And maybe they might get a slightly different group of flowers or whatever, because each one sort of orders for themselves, but you'll find pretty much the same thing at each place. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I know we have some non-local people on the call. So this is stuff. Maryville Garden Center is in Virginia. We've been getting more and more. I know we've had people from Oregon and Nevada and Utah and Canada all over. So you guys are welcome too, but unfortunately probably can't get to our store to get these supplies.
And you will have to adapt for your region too.
Yes. So this is a zone 7 most.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. So when you're talking about containers and refreshing the soil, do you clean the pots out? Like, do you sterilize them or do anything, or do you just refresh the soil periodically? And
if my stuff looked healthy and didn't have any disease problems, I don't sterilize the soil. Now, when it comes to things like tomatoes, it would be helpful to really clean it up nicely. And one thing that you could do with, if it's tomatoes, because they are so susceptible, if you grow them in the same soil year after year after year, they're more susceptible to the blights. And so there you might use a solution of 1 part Clorox to 10 parts water to clean up that container. But you can grow it 2 years in a row without worrying about it. Okay. Yeah.
okay.
With that, I really don't. I have a lot of containers. I trial a lot of plants. And although each year I say, I am not doing all these this year, somehow or other, I'm lying to myself, Okay. I don't clean everyone out. Now, that may not be a good thing to advise people, but I don't. And so far, I haven't had any problem.
Okay. Good information. All right. I'm getting a lot of questions on the amendments used in specifically containers. So I know you showed bumper crop, but that's not something you'd recommend putting in.
No, that was in the soil, and I had this laying right in front of me. This is top of the list favorite.
Okay. So if you're growing your vegetables in containers, use like a Fox Farm potting soil.
I love it. I love it. And we, in those containers, use this, adding in 1/3 more of it. Okay. And Fox Farm also makes Happy Frog, which is good also. But this one is the one I reach for first. It's more expensive, but oh boy, it's worth it. It has so many nutrients in it. But I also use the Garden Tone or Plant Tone in that.
Okay.
Now, the one product that I did not mention that I am very fond of, and I think I need to, is leaf growth. This is composted leaves. I love the fact that it is recycling, okay? And it is a very good product. I like to use it in a lot of my areas as a mulch, because I don't work it into the soil except in the vegetable gardens, okay? And it's good, particularly if your soil's not as good as mine is, which I've been doing it for years, so it's better soil. But don't worry about working it too deeply. And I don't like to work my soil every year because you're just turning up more weeds. I like to let the worms and nature do its thing and work that down into the soil by itself. But you can put down leaf growth, and then you can actually put your mulch on top of that. And I am very fond of the Virginia pines, unless it's a steep hill, and then you have to go with the serrated hardwood, okay? Now, I also compost. I have a big area and a lot of leaves. I compost myself, but I never have enough compost to take care of the things that I want to do, okay?
All right. Next question. You had mentioned using like the newspaper and the mulch and the pine needles. Do you pull the newspaper up when you're done with it, or does it kind of get mixed into the soil?
No. It works its way into the soil.
Okay.
And don't worry about the ink. They say it's perfectly safe now.
Got it. Okay.
It stays in place. And next year, I may put down fresh newspaper. And you could see even where I had raked aside to make my row or to do my individual plantings. I don't turn all my soil, just where I'm planting. That's all. Because I will bring up new seeds.
Okay. If you're doing raised garden beds and they're new, should you use normal topsoil with the compost and garden fertilizer?
You can use topsoil to fill part of it, but I would absolutely add some of the mix too. And I would particularly like to use some of the bumper crop or the coast of Maine lobster.
Okay. And I would add
those are all good. Okay.
Pardon?
Those are all good. You can use some topsoil, but you want these other things too.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And I was going to say too, because we've got a lot of questions coming in about raised beds.
Right.
And basically, or just starting a new garden bed for vegetable gardens. If you guys need, because I know we only have a few minutes left, please feel free to call our stores. Peg's a good resource. Also, David Yost, Andy Donak. We have a lot of people there.
Emails, it was easier for David and I.
Yes.
To answer those rather than calling. The email is much better.
Yeah.
Working for you, and that we can answer those things.
Yep.
It takes a little bit to explain.
Yes.
I showed you some of the raised bed things, and yes, you can use the topsoil, and we do sell that by the cubic yard. But do mix in some of these other things with it too, because that's the nutrients. Okay. Plus it loosens up that topsoil somewhat so that you have really great drainage.
Yes. Yes.
And then you would just simply add to that each year. Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming on raised beds. I know they're popular. Here's a question. We only have time for a couple more, but for when you're growing broccoli, you showed those pictures of your broccolis. How is there a way, is it possible to get them really big like the ones at the store?
You know, what you saw in that picture is pretty typical, but yeah, you can do a good job, especially if you've got good soil, and I mean good soil, fantastic soil, and then use your garden or plantains. And be sure you keep them properly watered. Don't let that soil go bone dry. You don't ever want it to be sopping all the time, but so let it dry somewhat between waterings. But then food and water, that's it. Sunshine.
Okay. All right, Peg, last question. I'm going to give you, how do you recommend, you were talking about hardening off seeds. How do you recommend doing that?
Well, when things come out of the greenhouse or you're growing your seeds inside, which I have now, I'm not going to say the second week of April that I'm going to put these peppers and tomatoes right out of my house into the garden. I'm going to sit them out on the deck, protecting them from the squirrels, because you don't want them to mess those dudes up after you've gone to all the trouble of growing them, okay? You sit them out during the day, preferably not in the hot sunshine right away. You ease them outside, and then you bring them back in if it's getting cool at night. So you do this for several days, and that's what hardening off is. You don't want to take those fresh plants that you're growing inside and sit them on a deck in the hot, hot sun all day. You'll fry them, okay? What you want to do is ease them outside with some shade in the hottest part of the day. And then if it's going to be cool at night, bring them back inside. And you also want to protect them from the animals, that they don't dig them up. I have had that happen, and it is not happy.
All right, Peg, we are at 1 o'clock. I know, guys, we have a ton of questions left. So please, if you want to follow up with us, you can hit reply on your confirmation email, or just send me an email. I'm going to put my email out in the chat really quick. And you guys can send me a note. I will connect you with Peg, or if you're interested specifically in soils and fertilizers, I can connect you with like David or Andy, who both have done give good information on those topics as well. Peg, you are doing a repeat of this class on Saturday in person.
Absolutely, and it will be pretty much a repeat. I'll have a little more time, and so I can go a little more in depth into it. But yes, it's pretty much a repeat. I mean, what can I say about,
Yeah. Well, so I will say, if anybody wants to come in, it will be a lot of the same information. But if you want to come in and chat with Peg in person at the Fair Oaks store, come check out the vegetables that are available. She will be there and doing a class on Saturday at 10. Please feel free to check out our schedule for any other upcoming classes as well. We have a number coming up.
By the way, David and I with you, yes. Right?
Yes. Next week. I'm excited about this
one. This afternoon. I think this is going to be fun, because David and I are going to be talking about our favorite things to use in the garden.
Yes. Yeah, this will be a fun one. You do not have to register for Saturday, so you can just show up to our in-person classes. No registration needed. And yes, I'm looking forward to that class. So those of you who probably remember, we used to have our Gardening Advisor TV show. So we're going to have a David and Peg reunion and they're going to go over some of their favorite gardening tools, because we get so many questions from you all about what tools they use and they talk about in their classes. So that'll be fun. And Peg, I'm going to let you wrap up if you have anything else you'd like to conclude with, and then we'll say goodbye for the afternoon.
Well, basically just get out there and do it. And don't be afraid to use your front yard. Just be sure to try to make it attractive, because you can see from some of the slides that it's very easy to nestle that tomato among the perennials, or use the front border of a bed with lettuce. It's a great border to do.
Oh, awesome. All right. One more thing, because people are asking, your class this weekend is at the Fair Oaks store, and yes. David and Peg's class is on Zoom. So you can sign up for that online through Eventbrite. And I think that's it. Peg, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you next week for our next class. And everybody have a great Thursday and Friday, and hopefully we'll see some of you guys this weekend. All righty. Bye.